You spoke of Iwogima and people stopping off to refuel or if they'd had damage to their planes or so forth. I know you had a crash or something happened to you where your plane eventually crashed. What was that?
Well, you're bringing in a couple items here. Iwo Jima was a wonderful thing. Now, you know, there were 33,000 Japanese soldiers on there, and we had about 20,000 Marines and Army that invaded there in February. And gosh, the first week in March, we had B-29s that, even though the fighting was going down there by Suribachi Peak and all, came in and made emergency landings, borrowed some gas so they could get on back to the Marianas. And before that, every time our planes went to Japan to bomb a target, the people on Iwo Jima would radio up to Japan, hey, there's a big crowd coming up, set up the defense, you know. But then later when I was there, why, we were able to find out that if we lost an engine or we had shot up or something, we could land there. And I was a lead crew and on Tokyo, and we got shot up, and we had 3-4 of us were wounded.
Over Tokyo?
Over Tokyo. Mm-hmm. And so we were planning to land at Iwo Jima. But, gee, we got there, and there were so many cripples. We lost 26 airplanes that night that were lost. Of course, we lost our hydraulics, which operated brakes and a lot of equipment, you know. Mm-hmm. And the main thing was that Bill Gardner, our bombardier, was leaning forward, closing the bomb bay doors. So we were lucky that we didn't get hit by a big shell while we still had our bomb load. And he was raised, leaning forward to get the switches, and this shell came and it made a hole about like a coffee can where he'd been sitting. And of course the flak scattered around, and I got it in the legs, and Jim Cowden, who was our aircraft commander, got it in the eyes and knocked out one whole set of controls. That was one nice thing about the B-29. It had dual sets of controls to operate, you know, the flaps or the rudder or the ailerons, whatever. And then we also had the autopilot, which was in a little box between us. And so when we got hit, Jim had flipped on the autopilot, and so here I am struggling, and I wanted to turn to the right, and he was going to the left, so I couldn't control it.
Were you injured?
Well, I didn't think I was ever going to dance anymore.
Oh, you worked your way back to Tinian?
We flew back, but poor Bill, he, by leaning forward, had his fanny just shredded, and he was in terrible pain. He wanted to jump out, and so we had to have a couple guys come up and sit on him, and that's why we wanted to get him to the hospital there at Iwo Jima. But we finally got some...
Iwo Jima wouldn't let you land?
No, because
why
they,
not?
and then not only that, but they had a nice big cloud over the field, so it was hard to even see them.
Mm-hmm. Why didn't they want you to land there?
Because they had too many other people who were in bad shape. We had, all 4 of our fans were still moving, but some of those guys were down to 1 or 2 engines, and if they were 2 engines out on one side, that was a real hard thing to fly a plane. Mm-hmm. So anyway, we went on down, and we decided we didn't want to land at Guam, so we landed at Tinian, and we shot red flares, and then of course time, because we had to crank down each one of the wheels, and there was about 100 revolutions of a crank to lower each one of the wheels. And then we weren't sure that the wheels would hold the plane, so when we crashed, we thought that would be bad. Mm-hmm. Well, we had 2 runways on West Field. There were 4 runways up on North Field where the 313th wing was. And so just as we had to shoot red flares that we had wounded aboard, and then when we didn't have any radio, and you weren't supposed to talk on radios anyway because the Japanese were monitoring, and we didn't want them to know that they were having some success in knocking down some of us B-29ers. So then the radio from the tower came on and says, clear the runway, we got 2 planes in behind you. So we didn't have any brakes or anything. We'd used up the one little emergency brake we had, so all we could do was just go on over the side. So that's why our plane shows up in a lot of pictures with sitting up in the air like that.
So you got the Purple Heart for that. You did a lot of brave things, Harry. You were Pathfinder.
Well, I was a lucky survivor.
You were a lucky survivor.